Capacity ramp up will take time, so it will be probably a bottleneck for the next months and years to come.
Herbert Diess, the CEO of Volkswagen, talking to Matt Miller a little bit earlier on in Munich. In some ways, Diess is trying to model himself, of course, on Elon Musk, a real push along the same sort of lines as Musk has been pushing along, i.e. the EV move, then into software. Software a key factor now for this company. The share price really ramped up on the back of that move, and it's kind of gone sideways since then. This is what markets look like right now, as you can see. European stocks higher, but on very, very light volume. It's Labor Day stateside. This is Bloomberg.
Neptune was discovered, everyone wanted to do it because it was this clear demonstration that you can use math to discover objects.
Unfortunately, since then, no major planet in our solar system has been found. But thanks to modern telescopes, thousands of smaller objects have been discovered in the past few decades beyond Neptune, called trans-Neptunian objects, or TNOs. And planetary scientists at the California Institute of Technology have noticed some anomalies with these objects. Their hypothesis? A giant theoretical planet beyond Neptune, Planet 9. And thanks to a new telescope, equipped with the largest digital camera ever built, we may be one sky survey away from finally finding it.
Market that over the past few weeks has made it clear it wants to go higher. It got a little spooked by the idea that geopolitical tensions are rising.
Let's check in on the Bloomberg First Word News. I'm Laura Wright. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken flew to Qatar for his first overseas trip since the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. Qatar is a major American military base. It's been a gateway for thousands of people airlifted out of Afghanistan. Blinken says he'll express his gratitude for all that Qatar has done to help with the evacuation. Hurricane Ida has had a greater initial impact on the Gulf of Mexico oil than any other storm in history. Ida has been responsible for the loss of 16.8 million barrels of output in the 10 days since offshore platforms were evacuated. That's 32% more than Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Still, prolonged disruption caused by Katrina and Hurricane Rita the same year led to the deferral of more than 160 million barrels of oil production. Singapore is one of the world's most vaccinated countries. Still, it's taking new steps to slow a rampant increase in the coronavirus, and the government's not ruling out a return to closing restaurants and restricting public life. If serious infections continue to rise, among the latest steps, more mandatory testing for high-risk environments such as gyms and personal care services. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Laura Wright. This is Bloomberg. Guy.
Laura, thank you very much indeed. Let's carry on with that theme that Laura was just talking about, what is happening with the evolution of COVID. The White House apparently hopeful the booster shots will kick off in around 2 weeks' time. Dr. Fauci saying those boosters likely to start with the Pfizer shot. We'll wait and see what happens with the other shots as we work our way through the fall. Dr. Amish Adolja joining us now, senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. Dr. Adolja, there was this expectation that post-Labor Day, we would be on a trajectory to return to normal. Kids will be back in classrooms, office workers will be back at their desks. Things are starting to look a little bit different. What is your expectation for what the fall is going to look like?
Well, we have to expect that we're going to see acceleration of cases as we get into a season that is colder, that is less sunny, that is less humid, where more people are indoors. The virus isn't going anywhere. It's endemic. It's established itself in the human population. And our goal has always been to remove its ability to cause serious disease by vaccinating high-risk individuals. So we're always going to have a baseline number of cases, hospitalizations, and deaths, and they're going to ebb and flow with the seasons. But in parts of the United States, for example, where vaccination rates and immunity levels are very low, they may get into trouble again with cases translating into hospitalization. So we sort of have a two-track pandemic in the United States and even in the world, between places that are heavily vaccinated and other places where there is not much immunity, so they still remain at risk.
But let me just focus more specifically, therefore, on the Northeast. It looks like we're seeing a peak in cases further south. But as you say, the weather is about to turn a little bit more inclement. We'll start seeing that maybe October, November, around Halloween. Is it your expectation that we will have that we can manage this process now that the virus is endemic without serious restrictions?
I do think that for many states, they will be able to manage cases and hospitalizations without restrictions. What we were trying to do throughout this pandemic is find a sustainable approach to sort of live with the virus because it wasn't going anywhere. And I do think with vaccination, with rapid testing, with teaching people how to make risk calculations about which activities are safer, which activities are more riskier, you're going to have some ability to manage in a way that we hadn't in the past. Remember, we're trying to decouple cases from hospitalizations, and that's already the case in many northeastern states where there is a lot of immunity in the population, where we see cases, but they're not seeing hospitals in crisis. Yes, hospitalizations have went up, but they're nothing like what we're seeing in the South.
The Israelis are going to brief U.S. health officials over the next few days as to what they're seeing. Israel has seen a fairly sustained pickup in cases and a return to restrictions. Why will the United States be different?
This is mostly going to be a different policy choice. I don't think that the United States is going to be initiating restrictions if we're just trying to stop breakthrough cases, for example, in vaccinated individuals that tend to be mild. Most things in the United States are really gauged towards hospital capacity. And we do have hospital capacity problems in some of the southern states. But in many other states, even with Delta variant kicking up, with cases in the community, we're not seeing it translate into hospitalization. So I don't think everything that Israel does from a policy perspective is going to be applicable to the United States, because I think we have different goals here. And our goal has always been to tame the virus, to defang it, remove its ability to crush hospital capacity, because this is an endemic virus that's not going to disappear. So I don't necessarily think that those two approaches of the countries are going to be completely congruent.
When we first started with this crisis, COVID-19 was a disease of the elderly. Is it now becoming a disease of the young? And if so, what do we need to do about that? Because at the moment, that is where the cases are popping up.
COVID-19 is now a disease of the unvaccinated, and it just so happens that if you're unvaccinated, you're more likely to be younger. If you look, for example, in the United States, people who are above the age of 65 are 80% plus fully vaccinated. So that's going to shift the virus to younger groups where there's lower vaccination rates. But we do know that that's why hospitalizations are different now, and deaths may be different in certain parts of the country, because younger people tend to be spared from the need for hospitalization or death. That doesn't mean they all are, but it means that in general they are. And I think what we have to really do is emphasize the fact that even if you're younger and you think that you're impervious to this virus, that getting the vaccine is a way to prevent any of those negative consequences from happening to you and prevent you from spreading it to other people, particularly other unvaccinated individuals. But this has been difficult. We have hit a wall of vaccine hesitancy, and it is in those younger age groups. If you look who's getting infected, it's younger people because they're not vaccinated, and some of them have high-risk conditions that put them at risk for hospitalization, and that's what we're seeing, kind of a shift in hospitalizations to younger people with high-risk factors like diabetes, like obesity, hypertension.
A lot of what we're talking about here is the 12 to 18-year-old cohort, or maybe a little bit into their 20s. The question that is increasingly being asked is, what about the below 12s as they return to school? Physiologically, they are different than their adolescent, older brothers and sisters. And I'm wondering whether or not you think that this fall we will end up seeing vaccinations for that younger group.
It's likely the case that in late fall, Pfizer and Moderna may get emergency use authorizations in the United States for children above the age of 5, so that we will be able to vaccinate those individuals. That group tends to be spared from the severe consequences of disease. For them, COVID-19 is very similar to flu or RSV, or maybe even less severe than those. So this is something that I think is optional, but I think will happen in the United States because we have this priority of keeping in-person schooling going, and children were damaged so much during the pandemic because in-person schooling was suspended. And vaccines are one way to keep schools operating as close to normal as possible. So I do think this is going to be something that happens probably in late fall.
RSV is obviously something that does hit this age group pretty hard. Flu tends to hit the older age groups. We've not really had to deal with it for a year or so. How bad is it going to be this autumn? How bad are we going to see these two further complicating factors in terms of having to deal with COVID and having to deal with the kind of the return to normality and keeping people out of hospital?
We definitely are going to see an uptick in other respiratory viruses. I've already taken care of patients with other respiratory viruses other than COVID-19. And RSV has been kicking up a lot in the South. We know that pediatric hospitals got hit hard with RSV, and that may be because RSV had not been transmitting. People's immunity to it may have waned during the height of the shutdowns in the United States, and now it's coming back. So we do have to prepare for RSV to really impact children, and it's already something that pediatric intensive care units are dealing with. Flu is a little bit of a wild card because we haven't seen flu for now about a season and a half, and we know it circulates between the southern and northern hemisphere, and the southern hemisphere, which is coming out of their flu season, basically still had a very non-existent flu season. So it's unclear what percentage of the population is going to get influenza or how heavy it's going to circulate. We want people to get flu vaccinated again just so that we can prepare for it, but it's still something that there's a lot of uncertainty about. But the other respiratory viruses are definitely going to be there as people start to socially interact. You're not going to get a respite from all those colds like we did during the shutdowns.
Dr. Dolger, it's always a pleasure. Useful insights. Thank you very much indeed this Labor Day. Dr. Amish Dolger of Johns Hopkins. Greatly appreciated. The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. What have we got coming up for you? We're going to take you back to Munich. The Motor Show is underway. The Porsche CEO standing by with Matt Miller. That's coming up. This is Bloomberg.
what's happening on Wall Street.
It's the basic law of economics.
The Fed is telling us this is transitory.
Need to catch up?
This is Bloomberg Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston.
We've got the information and insights.
David, you just hit the nail right on the head.
From businesses most influential and instrumental.
I support the new framework.
We need to invest in our systems.
Bloomberg Wall Street Week premieres Friday with replays all weekend on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
会場に行って観戦するということも難しいお子さんがいるんです。このように冷房の効いた香港の体育館の中で、それこそ大会の最前列で観戦ができる、体験ができる、こういうことをとてもありがたいことだなというふうに思っていますし、この技術に感動しています。 予想以上に子どもたちの反応が良かったというのはですね、とても校長として嬉しく感じております。この子どもたち、どれだけオリンピックの心待ちにしていたのかっていったことがよくわかるような今日の表情です。
Let's get the session started and wrap up the trading week.
News.
Who knew that one earnings story could tank the entire market? There's upward pressure on wages.
Analysis.
This is really a slow, ongoing implosion.
Context.
Is there veracity to this granular data of ADP?
It's an ugly report.
The power of the Bloomberg terminal. The power of Bloomberg Television and Radio.
Tesla's the one that we got our eyes on.
Bloomberg has it covered.
The Motor Show is underway in Munich. Matt Miller knows his way around a 911. He feels perfectly, therefore, positioned to talk to the CEO of Porsche. Matt, you having fun?
Yes, I am, Guy. I'm very happy to be back at an auto show, first of all. And to be honest with you, full disclosure, I'm even happier to be standing in front of a Porsche. I'm here with the CEO of Oliver Blume, and we're standing in front of the Mission R, which is your new concept electric race car. Tell us quickly about it and how likely we are to see this coming into production.
The Mission R is our concept idea of future motorsport, and as you know from Porsche, like when we look at the study of the 918 or the Taycan or so-called Mission E in these days, Porsche always stands for that dreams come true, and therefore behind of the Mission R this fantastic motorsport electric sports car with 1,000 horsepower. And a top speed over 300 kilometers per hour.
1,000 horsepower.
1,000 horsepower and 300 kilometers per hour could come reality in future. For example, for Porsche-owned customer series, but there are also elements, technical elements, we can transfer to series cars.
All right, 300 kilometers an hour, just for the Americans watching, is about 187.5 miles per hour, I believe. How likely are we to see an actual series with these kind of cars in it? I mean, right now we have the Formula E, but this looks more like a DTM car.
That's right, and when we develop a concept like this, we have already thought about which technology we can transfer to our future serial cars. As you remember, we launched the 800-volt system with the Taycan. We were the first in the automotive industry to work on this system, and so we have a new battery system inside and several technological news. And so it is always linked to future theory of production.
Taycan, I saw one upstairs, and I've seen a lot in real life lately. Is it outselling the 911 already, or do you expect that to happen?
We think that there isn't a competition in between the 911 and the Taycan.
Okay, but who's winning?
Both are fantastic, and volume has never been the driver for Porsche. We are in a very positive level in order intakes of the Taycan now, but also on the 911. And so at the end, we can say that both of them are very successfully.
The Italians are pushing now, reportedly, to break exemptions and continue to produce internal combustion engines past 2035 for Lamborghini and Ferrari. Would Porsche want to do the same thing? Will you want to keep producing internal combustion engines?
First of all, we have a very ambitious sustainability story. We want to be carbon neutral by 2030. That's more ambitious than other car manufacturers. And I think decarbonization is a global question, and everybody has to contribute. And now we are in a transition period, and there are also solutions for combustion engines. Porsche is investing in a pilot installation to produce e-fuels done by hydrogen, and so these e-fuels can be used in combustion engines, and we are running a test fleet and are able to reduce the CO2 of about 90%. And so that might be an option for the transition period. In the future, in the next decade, I think electromobility will be unbeatable.
But you won't phase out the boxer motor, right? I mean, the 911 surely is going to continue past 2030.
We have a very clear strategy that we will offer for our customers and fans for the next years in each of our Porsche segments: a combustion engine, a hybrid engine, and a whole electric engine. And therefore, we will be flexible. For the 911, we created the idea with the e-fuels and run the 911 with a combustion engine as long as we can, while we are offering other products 100% electric.
I wanted to ask about China because I heard an interesting fact. Your youngest buyers are in China. You have three main markets, of course, the US, Europe, and China. Are they also the highest margin buyers? Do they pay the most money for products?
China is a very important market for Porsche. Beside of North America, where we have a third of our sales, and Europe and rest of the world, China counts around about 1/3. And it's correct, the youngest buyer of Porsche, the average age in China is 30, 35 only. And that is a big potential for Porsche to get all these young Chinese fans for our brand. And therefore, we are looking forward how the market will develop. And the order intakes in China are fantastic. We had an all-time high in 2020. And this year, we are going for another record year.
So you're not concerned about the new regulations, the idea that they want to redistribute wealth? I mean, you still are going to sell as many Porsches there as you can.
We are not worried about, and we are well prepared. On the one hand side, from our technology, from our sustainability story, but also all the investments we do in China, we are not worried about. And at the end, we can count on our fans in China.
Speaking of investments, you were talking about the battery supplier that you're working with, Custom Cells, I think they're called, and it seems like at this show, everyone is scrapping to get, battery production. You obviously want to get as many chips as you can. What's the supply chain situation looking like?
Looking to the batteries, we are working together with the Volkswagen Group, sharing batteries. Our investment is especially for the top segment of the batteries, because we think that's a core of Porsche, to invest there. High power density, high energy density, this battery, new technology, fast charging, and therefore we are investing there. The semiconductors is another story, and we are fighting hard to get the right volume of semiconductors, and there we have to rethink the whole supply chain because the demand of semiconductors will be even higher in future, and therefore we are working together with our colleagues from the Volkswagen Group to rethink how to organize the supply chain in future even better.
By the way, I talked to Herbert Diess this morning, the CEO of Volkswagen, and I just saw Wolfgang Porsche upstairs. How is the idea of the possibility of a Porsche IPO playing out right now? I mean, surely the company is worth more than the sum of its parts, and you could monetize that by selling just a small piece of Porsche. How do those two guys feel about it?
Yeah, first of all, it's not our decision. It has to be taken by Volkswagen Group and Wolfsburg. But on the one hand side, we have a lot of synergies in the Volkswagen Group. On the other side, there are also a lot of opportunities thinking in this direction. There's nothing decided, and at the end, it has to be done in the Volkswagen Group.
But it's still interesting to you. I mean, as a CEO, you think you could run the business well if they would sell a chunk of it?
I think there have been a lot of rumors about it, and it's because of the success story of Porsche. Porsche stands for a very consistent financial situation. When you look at the financial results in 2020, the first half year 21, then we have electrification story, over 80% of cars electrified by 2030, then sustainability, CO2 carbon neutral by 2030, and then our technological business we do at Porsche. And this combination makes it interesting, and therefore I think there are a lot of rumors in the market.
All right, thank you so much for joining us, Oliver. Great talking to you. Oliver Blume, CEO of Porsche, talking to us here at the Munich Auto Show in front of the new Mission R. Guy, back to you.
Matt, good job pushing on that IPO. I know it's a big story that everybody's really focusing on. Interesting that we spent so much time talking about your concern around internal combustion engines and what's going next in the 911. We'll be back with Matt a little bit later. We need to dig into that story a little bit more. We'll see whether electric cars ultimately are the way forward in a very rapid manner when it comes to that sector. This is Bloomberg.
Somebody said, I want to be the next Reid Hoffman. What would you say is the best training ground to do that?
Well, I'm still young enough that I'm still hoping to be the next Reid Hoffman myself.
What's happening on the ground right now, just in terms of consumer price tolerance?
We see a strong consumer right now. And we can see that even in the early starts to back to school and back to college season that we're really pleased with. And I think if we step back and look at the quarter, you know, we see the evidence of that strong consumer.
Mercedes-Benz is on a path towards CO2 neutral mobility. So we have flicked the switch there, and really we're going to step by step electrify everything. And what does that mean? Combustion engines get electrified.
Time for the Bloomberg Business Flash, a look at some of the biggest business stories in the news right now. I'm Laura Wright. There's a sign that bankers' travel in Europe is picking up. London City Airport, a favourite of regional business travellers, is seeing a tentative reawakening. British Airways and Lufthansa have restored flights to key financial centres